Well, good evening, people. How are you? You know, I only hope that my grandmother would see me now here. You know, being privileged to address people in the great University of Harvard is something very special. Thank you very much for having me here. This is a great honor, really, for me to have all of you here this evening. I'm also very happy to have some Finnish colleagues here. My cousin Juha Ignatius is here. I'll tell you a little bit later why he's traveling with me. And we also have Mr. Esko Aho here, sitting in the front seat. He's the senior fellow here in Kennedy School. And Esko is a very special person also in the history of Finland, because he was the youngest prime minister in Finland just before we were entering the European Union in the early 1990s. And I'm sure that there are several parts of my story of Finnish education that he remembers and knows much better than I do. So if you want to correct something that I explain here, please do so. How many teachers do I have here this evening? Okay. How many students? Wonderful, okay. How many of you have been in Finland? Wonderful. How many of you would like to visit Finland? Everybody. You know, somebody said to me in a meeting like this that there are two types of people in the world. There are Finns and wannabe Finns. Right, okay. Let me make two notes here before I start that are very important. The first one is that I didn't come here to try to convince you that Finland has the best education system in the world that you often read in the media. You know, this is what we hear often in Finland. People come to see us and say that we want to see the best education system in the world. And I think we should not think like this. At least Finns don't want to see themselves and their own work like this. And Bob was mentioning the OECD PISA work. I think the evidence that we have to compare whole education systems is really too little. If you use the OECD PISA or TIMSS or any of these studies that we have, you can say something about the school systems or education systems, but you certainly cannot say that one education system is better than the other one just by relying on these evidences. So I'm not trying to convince you that Finns have discovered the best education system in the world. The other one, equally important, that I'm not trying to do here with you is to try to convince you that if you only do what the Finns have been doing during the last 30 or 40 years, everything will be fine here in the great country of the United States of America. It doesn't work like this. But I'm here to tell you the story of what we have been doing. And I'm a very strong believer of learning from one another. You know, if there's one thing that Finns have been doing very well in building the school system, is that we have been very good learners. And we have been particularly good learners from you, from the American educators and researchers and innovators. So thank you very much for all these ideas. I think without the American inspiration, we would not have the school system that we have. I often say that most of these classroom innovations and ideas that we have, that you can see in Finland, are from this country. Yeah? We have our own research and development innovation work, but not to the point that would have helped us to do what we have been able to do. And that's why I think if we can learn from other countries, then also I think the United States can learn from, not only from Finland, but many others, to find a way to have a school system that you all deserve. Okay? How's my English? Is it all right? You know, in Finland we speak several languages. We have two official languages, Finnish and Swedish, so I can speak Finnish too for you if you want. And then most people study two foreign languages in school, so most Finnish people, they speak about 3 or 4 different languages, and that's a kind of a diversity that we have in my country. All right, let's go. I'm here with my cousin Juha, and we came here because our grandparents have been here before us. This is our grandfather, and I would like to dedicate this great opportunity to talk to you this evening to our grandfather, Einar, who in this picture he's 19 years old. He was one of those many who left Finland. He left Finland in the spring of 1914, so 99 years ago, and came to New York to look for education and work. That time Finland was part of the Russian Federation, and life was not always very good to young people like him. He was afraid to be sent to the Russian army and fight the wars. The First World War started just a few months later when he left. Then Finland became independent in 1917, and he came back to see his old father and some of the relatives living in a newly born independent state. And then it happened that sometimes happen, you know, that you meet a person and you fall in love, you get married, and then Juha's mother came, and then my father came, and the rest is history. But you know, if the stars would have been in a little bit different position, I could be one of you, right? Listen to somebody else from Finland to tell the same story, yeah? You would be, Esko would be here anyway. So that's one of the things that we, and I remember grandfather's stories about this country. He remained an American citizen until mid-1930s, and he always spoke very highly about the education, about this country and people, and he had a huge respect on what this country has been able to accomplish. So I'm also conveying a part of his gratitude to this wonderful nation. This is another one. This one is Einar's grandfather. So this is our grandfather's grandfather. And part of the story why we are here today, why we came to the United States, and why Juha is with me, is that we are going to see where he went. You know, he left Finland in 1839 and traveled around the Latin America, the Cape of Good Hope, all the way up to Alaska, Sitka. That was part of Russia at that time, okay? So he left Russia, and 9 months later arrived in his home country, but on the other side of the planet. And so we're gonna go to Sitka tomorrow, to Anchorage, to see where he went in 1840 in the spring, and we're gonna meet some people there who will help us to see what happened there. Sitka was it was a capital of Alaska, about 500 people living there, and we are the first ones in our family to go back there and see the site ourselves. So this evening is dedicated to these great grandfathers of ours. My first question to you is that I often ask when I have a chance to speak to people who want to go to Finland but have never been there, is that what do you think when you hear the magic word Finland? If you close your eyes and you just let the pictures come, what is the first idea that you have in your mind? Just tell me. Snow, okay? Anything else but snow? Reindeers, forests. Something else? Sauna, good. Cell phones. We used to have Nokia. And Esko still has a Nokia. Yeah. Okay. You know, it's very interesting. It doesn't matter where I go. Even if I go to Sweden, that is our western neighbor, people always say reindeers, snow, and something like this. Yeah? And I think this is very important because, you know, if people have their images of Finland or any other country, but in this case Finland, something like this, that you have a lot of reindeers and you have forests and you have snow and ice, and you know, there are many people, by the way, who think that Finland is always like this. 12 months a year, 24 hours a day, it's always like this. Sun never shines. And then there are some people who come to me and say, aha, now I know why Finnish kids are so good in education and in these international studies of PISA and other things, because it's always like this. You know, there's nothing else to do. You go to school, you stay indoors whole day and study and learn things, then you come back home. You cannot go out and play football or baseball or these things. You study, you do homework. Yeah? But those people who have Finnish friends or who have been in Finland know that this is not the full story. But we have to go beyond these images and look at some of the things that many people don't know about my country. And these are always things that are interesting to see, that what the country really looks like. There are many other things related to these images and beliefs that people have, but I don't want to get into this. I want to show you 5 things that you probably don't know, most of you don't know about Finland, but the things that are very important, describing the culture and the context of education before we can make any sense of why Finland has been doing education as it has, okay? I think that we have to understand the certain aspects of the culture and the country and the people before you can answer the question that why Finland or why any country is doing in education as it has. One of the most interesting things is that Finland has never aimed to be number one in education. I often meet people who say that they think that Finns are so good in education because they have had a kind of an aggressive strategy to beat the hell out of everybody else. Yeah? And we have just been successful because we are small and rather homogeneous, less than 6 million people. And remember, it's always ice and cold and dark outside. So it's easy to fix your school system when you have these very funny conditions over there. But, you know, when I travel around the world, this is a typical example of a minister of education. When I ask that, what is your goal? Where you are heading to? What is your dream in education? Many countries now, they have a dream or they have their objective to be number one in the world or among 5 best countries in the world. Okay? This country is one of them, right? I haven't seen any American strategy would say that we want to be number 12. Have you? Or even that American school system will be number 5 in 2020. You know, if you're in a business of setting your national goals like this, there's only one way in America to say that we want to be number 1. And I think that's your problem. Because as soon as you start to compete against other countries, you start to create policies and kind of implement these plans that lead to all these competition-related things and testing, and because you want to know whether you are getting there, okay? But if you look at how Finland has been doing the same thing during the last 40 years and during the leadership of Esko Aho here in the 1990s, this was exactly the same line of thinking, that we have always wanted to have a good school for all of our children. So this is another good example of the great American ideals of equal educational opportunity for everybody, starting from Jefferson all the way through, yeah, except today, yeah. But this is how we think about education, that we want to have a good school for all of our children, regardless of where they live and where they come from, okay? And it's, again, a very different type of implications. If you have a minister, a leader who has this type of dream or goal, of course, this minister here will think about are all children learning, what type of support we need for kids so that they can be successful, how can we help teachers to do their best, and many other things. And this is exactly how we have been thinking about education throughout the last 40 years, really. It's two different, very different paradigms. But make no mistake that Finland has not been in this race of kind of a global competition to try to be the best country in the world. There's probably only one country in the world that we want to beat, and that's Sweden. And I want to tell this story because I think Esko Aho was a prime minister in Finland when our Minister of Education went to see her colleague in Stockholm. I don't know if you know this story, but there was a meeting in Stockholm where our minister and Swedish Minister of Education had a meeting. And what happened in the meeting was that the Swedish minister was giving a long presentation to our delegation of how Sweden will be the #1 school system when the OECD publishes the first 2000 PISA results. And our minister's response was that, thank you very much, this is all very interesting. And we Finns, we wish you good luck in your efforts to be #1. But I can tell you one thing, that in Finland our goals are much more modest than yours. Because you see, in Finland, for us, it's enough to be ahead of Sweden. And of course, this was a kind of a entertaining comment. The funny thing was 5 years later when this thing really happened, that we were able to beat our dear neighbor in the West. The second thing is, and now we come to the Finnish people's understanding of their past and history. You know, Finland will be 100 years old in about 3 years' time. So it's a fair thing to ask a question that, so what did we accomplish? What have we done during the last 100 years? And our colleague who was here yesterday, Dr. Pilvi Torsti, was leading a big research project a few years ago that asked, among other things, from people adult people in Finland, that what do they consider as the most important accomplishments in our independent history, okay? And here are some of those things that you will see. You see a couple of wars that we were able to, not necessarily win the war, but almost. We were able to build a welfare state, and Finland was the first country that issued the full political rights to women to stand in election and vote. But 75% of those who responded to this study mentioned free public education. I don't know any other country on the planet where people would rate public school, free public education, and in Finland all the education is free, including higher education, universities. Finnish people never pay for their kids or their own education. But this is how much people value education. When anybody says that education is important, I said, ask your people how highly they rate the building this school system that you have among all the other things. I don't know, here in the United States, how would the list of 5 most important accomplishments look like? But my guess would be that your public school system is not among those 5, right? You have things like sending man to the moon and having Miles Davis in this country and many other things, but not probably public education. The third one is a little bit similar thing, but equally important, and this is about to what extent people trust public school system and public institutions in Finland. So this is what our government is regularly asking taxpayers, how much they can rely and trust on public institutions, and I'll show you the top 5 here. And you will see that we have 2 public institutions that are on the top of this list. We have police in Finland and public school. Okay? About 90% of Finnish people say that they trust, they can rely on a public institution called school and university. Yeah? Do you know what is the rate here in the United States? If you ask people, how many people trust the school system? It's 29%. Yeah? So think about the difference. So that's where Finland and the United States are very different. You know, people can, in general, in my country, we can trust and rely on this institution called school. We can trust what the teachers and principals are doing in the school. And then many of these questions that you have, you are struggling here, like accountability and control and testing and data and all these things, get a very different meaning in Finland. Because we can do many of these things that you have to establish systems by trust, simply saying that we trust them. They're doing right things, okay? Then the fourth one is, again, something that I'll show you how we are very different. I'm looking at how the wealth is distributed in different countries in comparison with the educational performance. You know, it's an interesting question intellectually to ask, that is there any correlation between income inequality, in other words, how the countries distribute their wealth among people and how well kids are doing in the school system, okay? And now because we have the OECD data, for example, we can use the OECD PISA data here, and we can look at from different sources how the income is distributed. I'll give you the average of these 2 variables over there and ask you the question, where do you think the United States is here? Where would you put your flag? This way or that way? So you have more inequality this way and more equality this way. So this way, right? Okay, let's see. That's where the United States is. It's one of the most unequal nations in the world. There's only one country that I know that has more inequality in terms of income distribution, and that's Singapore. Okay? And I read somewhere just a couple of days ago that inequality in terms of wealth distribution in the United States today is as it was in 1774. So United States has never been so unequal in terms of gap between the rich and poor that it is now. Okay? Where do you think Finland is? Okay, that's where we are very different. You see, we have a relatively higher performance in our schools, in our school system, and Finland is still fairly equal in terms of wealth division, okay? And here are some of the other countries. These are not all the OECD countries. I'll give you about 22 wealthiest nations in the world. And this is how, this is how the correlation between the income inequality and educational performance looks like. So this is kind of indicating that when your equality gets worse, it becomes more difficult to maintain the high quality, produce a high quality school system, okay? And in the work that I have referred here, the Wilkinson-Pickett's The Spirit Level book is a wonderful source of evidence also how inequality influences everything, not only education, but many other things in our lives. And that's why if you are seriously in education reform business, we have to speak about things like this as well, like we know very well in Finland. And lastly, the last thing here is that if you look at the Finnish performance in the society as a whole, I'll give you some examples from the international rankings and comparisons that you can easily find if you go to the Google or Yahoo, if you wish, whatever you want to use, and just type international ranking or index or something, and these are the things that you will see. All of these things that you see here are from the serious trusted institutions like World Economic Forum and OECD, United Nations, and other things. And I'm comparing here Finland's performance in what I consider being important areas of our lives, like economy, technology, innovation, equality, equity, health, many other things, including how we are empowering women in our societies to the United States. And you will see that Finland is doing fairly well in all of these measures. So why do I show this to you? Simply to argue that maybe it's just a normal thing that education will also do very well if the country is doing fairly well in many other things, right? That maybe there's no miracle in education in Finland. It's just a part of the overall high-performing country. Let me take here two things, and now I'm doing this also because Esko Aho is here. The World Economic Forum recently, just a couple of weeks ago, ranked Finland as the most network-ready or technologically advanced country in the world. Number one, okay? How many of you know a thing called Angry Birds? Almost everybody, yeah? I know that you play Angry Birds, but you don't want to admit it, yeah? It's a kind of a nice thing to do. Okay, so now when you go home from this forum, if you don't learn anything else, you can go and tell your husband or wife that, you know, honey, I learned that Finland has Angry Birds. Yeah? Let me tell you another thing that you can learn. If you look at this thing here, the United Nations claims that Finland has some of the happiest people in the world. Sometimes it's difficult to believe, but that's what the evidence says, that we are the happiest people in the world after Denmark. Okay? Any Danish people here? Okay, that's all right. But now when you go home, you can say that, you know, Finland has Angry Birds and happy people. Yeah? I was speaking in another country some time ago, and when I said that Finland has Angry Birds and happy people, there was somebody in the audience who said that we have happy birds but very angry people because of the bad state of our education system over there. You probably remember there was the Newsweek magazine published a story 2.5 years ago, simply asking the question that what is the best country in the world? And when you read the story, you don't have to go too far. You see that the best country in the world is, that's right, it's Finland. Okay? But listen to this. When this issue was published on the 17th of August in 2010, somebody was reading this and figured out that in one of the indexes where the maximum score is 100 points, and that was education, Finland was awarded 102 points out of 100. So the simple mathematics, if you take these 2 points away, leads to the situation where Switzerland is the best country in the world and Finland is the second. And there were 2 phone calls to Newsweek magazine asking for recount and correcting this bad mistake. Do you know where these phone calls came from? Stockholm? Zurich? No. They both came from Helsinki. From 2 of our newspapers, they said that you have made a mistake and you have to correct. Can you believe this? And next day, the other newspaper published a big editorial saying that everybody thinks that Finland has Finland is the best country in the world except the Finns. Yeah, so that's how much we rely on ourselves. This is how the USA Today wrote about a little bit more than a year ago, that if you want to live the American dream, you have to move to Finland. Yeah? And remember, this is not this is not the Finnish magazine, the newspaper, this is American newspaper. So, Finland is not behind of this kind of a hype of elevating our country as in the limelights of the world, whether it's education or something else, it's somebody else's work. And I must say that many people in Finland feel quite embarrassed about this thing, because we care more about how we are able to serve and help our own people and provide good education for our kids, a good life and safety for our people. But, if we are in this situation, what can you do? So now my question to you is that what do you think is behind this? Can we explain somehow that there's a small country like Finland that has been able to do so many things right, that we are performing so well in many of these areas, including education? And I think we have two principal options. One is that we have had a similar type of policies and similar type of implementation that most other countries have. But because we are small and rather homogeneous, and because it's always dark and cold outside in Finland, we have just been luckier than everybody else to get there. Or the other one is that we have had very different policies and very different way of implementing this, and that's why we are where we are. And we have to look at the second option. Okay. So what is behind this story of Finland is that we have in many ways walked a very different pathway. Okay. And I'm going to speak a little bit about the education now, how the country is doing these things in a different way. I have in my book and in my work during the last 10 years, really, when I have been traveling around the world, and remember I was working 5 years and lived in Washington, D.C., but I'm fine now. And Washington time also gave me an opportunity to, really take a global look at the what's going on in education. So I designed this little idea called global educational reform movement, and I kind of like it because if you take the first letters of these 3 words, you get the word germ. Okay, so it's like a infection type of thing. And this is not theory. When I was a young, passionate high school graduate and I decided to become a teacher in Finland, I had 2 theories how to educate children, but no kids. Okay? Now I have 2 sons, but no theories anymore. So as an educator, I don't really believe in theories, but it's an idea. It's a kind of an idea that I think will somehow help you to understand what is going on around the world. So these are the principles and things that people in different countries seem to be following when they are in a business of improving quality of their school systems here in the United States or in the rest of the world. And I'm going to show you how these ideas of germ reflect to the reality in Finland. In other words, how we have been responding to some of these things. The main thing that I can see around the world really today is the faith in competition as a driving engine of improving the change, improving school systems and driving the change. In other words, that we are seeing more and more schools and teachers and even pupils and districts, competing against one another, hoping that this competition will lower the price and enhance the quality. Okay? But in Finland, we don't think like this. But we believe that education is still more a business of collaboration, cooperation, sharing, networking, doing things together. And many of the observers who come from outside of Finland and write analysis about our school system say that it's amazing to see how individual schools and districts are speaking about this thing, that they are educating not their children, but our children, our people. And that's why we have tried to keep the competition away deliberately from our education policies really during the last 40 years. The second one is the idea of standardization, and you know this much better than most other people in the world, what standardization in education means, that we are creating standards and expectations for all sorts of things in our schools and classrooms and teaching and learning and curriculum and many other things, hoping that if we just raise the standards a little bit, everything will be better. Yeah? But standardization is a kind of an idea that we are expecting that everybody should learn the same things and often in a similar way. But in Finland, this goes against the thinking that we think is important in our schools, because we rather than standardize, we want to personalize, individualize, customize our school system. For example, each and every school in Finland is designing and setting their own standards, their own curriculum based on the national framework. And each and every high school student in Finland has a personalized study plan, okay? And our legislation, our law in education says that education has to be organized according to the needs of each and every child. So we cannot standardize. We cannot compare students through our student assessment to other students, but we have to compare them against themselves and their own potential. So it's a very different philosophy of education as well, because we believe in creativity rather than standardization. The third one is a test-based accountability, and this includes two ideas. Again, you are very familiar with this, what it means. Accountability here means that we are holding teachers and schools accountable for students' learning by employing all sorts of standardized assessments and tests to get the data, whether teachers and schools are doing the right thing, okay? And what I see around the world happening is that there's more and more testing, and there are stronger and stronger accountability over schools when people hope that the quality will improve and that this will solve and overcome the problems that we have in our public school systems. In Finland, we can rely much more trust for the reasons that I told you before, okay? And actually in Finnish language, we don't have a word accountability in education. So it's more like a business term, yeah? So that's why we rather speak about responsibility. In my book, I offer you a definition for educational accountability. Accountability is something that is left when responsibility is taken away, okay? And that's something that you can see in Finnish schools very, very clearly. So again, this is not only a different kind of a way of doing the accountability, but it's almost the opposite way of, thinking about education and learning of children in our schools. And fourthly, what I see around the world is an increasing amount of choice for parents to choose where they want to educate, where they want to send their children, okay? We have parental choice in Finnish school system, but we are kind of controlling it to the point that there will be more choice when children go to high school or upper secondary school, and there will be less choice between schools before that. But there's a lot of choice within the school, okay? And I think that if you have choice, parental choice and educational equity as two ends of the same continuum, you cannot have both of these at the same time, okay? So if you value parental choice, if you believe that you can run school system like you run a marketplace, then you have to sacrifice educational equity. You have to forget it in a way, okay? And if you want to have more equity, you have to control the choice, okay? So the global educational reform movement is more like a kind of a philosophy of seeing school as a marketplace, managing school like you run the corporation or market. And the Finnish way is more like a way of, trusting professionals, building professionalism within the schools and school system. Again, a very different paradigms, okay? Are you with me? Nobody sleeps? No? Okay, that's good. Okay, I hope that this shows you that although I'm using the colors black and white here, that the world is never black and white. And of course we have standardization, we have competition, we have accountability in Finland, and we have choice. But if you have to choose the driver for your education reform, what do you think is the kind of a main driver of improvement? Then this is what Finland has chosen to do rather than the other side. And those who are in the business of global educational reform movement have believed more on this side, and then put this Finnish side on the kind of a secondary thing. Now I know that some people here are asking the question that, so do we have any evidence of the germ? In other words, what do we know about the educational performance of those countries around the world who have been infected by this wicked germ at some point? And now we have to look at really the 1990s, what has happened in the 1990s and early 2000 if we want to have for example, the OECD evidence here. And I'll show you this here, okay? So in this picture you will see the international averages from the OECD PISA study. We are looking at the math performance of 15-year-olds in different countries. And what you see here is the 2000 study is the blue one. This is 2003, 2006, and 2009 study, okay? And so I'm comparing, just seeing how kids in the different countries are doing in these consecutive PISA studies in mathematics. And you can easily see that in the United States, England, Canada, Australia, Japan, New Zealand, and the Netherlands, the countries that all have been infected in a way by this virus called germ, the performance has been declining. Every single one of them, okay? So if the germ has been a right idea, a right way to think about improving education, there should be at least one country or maybe two that would have been able to improve things. And now somebody says that, but how about science or reading? Well, it doesn't really change the picture at all. So I can show you the same data from science and reading, and the trend is exactly the same. And this is what Finland has been doing. We don't have a consistent performance during these four PISA studies, but you can see that the overall trend has been improving, okay? And Finland is the example of those education systems and countries where we have been remaining immune or resistant to this wicked virus or germ that is going around the world, okay? So this raises a question for all of those who still believe that competition, standardization, choice, accountability, and all these things are the best ways to improve the quality of education. Just show them the data and ask to explain this picture, okay? So let me speak quickly about three education policies here that I think are fundamental behind the educational performance in Finland, and the first one of them is this equity issue that I mentioned earlier, okay? So let me tell you one thing about equity, because I'm not an English speaker, so I have to learn all these terms again. And we don't, again, in Finnish language, we don't have the term equity. We use the word equality, and equity and equality are a little bit different words. And Esko probably remembers that when we were building our comprehensive school or peruskoulu in Finland, there was a lot of also political discussion about this equality or equity thing, how important or how meaningful it is. But in this picture, what I mean by equity is that it's simply the strength of relationship between children's family background and how they're doing in the school, okay? And again, the Americans know this much better than anybody else because of your great research from James Coleman in mid-1960s. Coleman report concluded that schools really don't make any difference because children's destiny educationally is determined by where they come from, okay? So this means that if this is the case, then this type of education system is not very equitable because it's not able to overcome these characteristics and features that many children bring with them, for example, because of the poverty that they have in the home, or low level of education, or single parenting, or something like this to the school, okay? So if we have a more equitable school system, it means that the school system is doing something, and the society is probably doing something that is helping everybody to learn. And you know, remember that this has been a dream of Finland to help everybody to learn. So if you have a more equitable school system, you will see it on this side of the graph, all right? And if you have the school system that is equitable, and where students learn well, it will go up there, okay? So if you have a school system that is on this side of the graph and lower part, it means that the quality is low of learning and equity is low. So there's a lot of inequity there, all right? Is it clear? Wonderful, okay? Now, where do you think United States is here? What do you mean? How far? What I'm going to show you is, I know that 95% of you will be surprised to see this, okay? This is where United States is, okay? And most people here, by the way, they think exactly that America must be here in this lower left, right-hand corner, or left-hand corner from you, okay? But you know, and this is from the OECD data, and if this is true, and why wouldn't it be, because it's the OECD, right? It means that your public school system is doing actually quite well, given all the complexities and diversities and difficulties that you have here. You have 22% or 3% of your children living in poverty, but you are still able to have the public school system that is very close to the international average, okay? Of course, there's a long way to go. If you want to have a high quality and high equity, there's a pathway to go, but it's, you know, there are many countries that are not even close to what you are. Okay? So here are some of the OECD countries and non-OECD countries, and you will see one interesting thing here. And it is that somehow these countries seem to find their place in a kind of a pathway from low level there to the heaven. Yeah, okay? And you know, heaven is where South Korea, Japan, and Canada are. So it's a stairway to heaven. You know this song? Yeah? You still recognize some of these flags, right? Yeah, I know that some people are now trying to recall their geography or school days and what was this flag, okay? But where's Finland? Do you know how a Finnish flag looks like? I can give you a hint. It's the most beautiful flag of all. It's a white flag with a blue cross, okay? So here, this is Denmark, Sweden, Norway. I'll show you where this is where Finland was in 1972, okay? And if you read my book, you will find the evidence. I will show you how the equity was a problem in Finland because we were dividing people into two different types of school systems, and our educational performance in international studies was below the world average, okay? And now I'll show you what has happened in Finland during the 40 years in 2 seconds, okay? Because you probably guess that Finland will be somewhere here where the South Korea, Japan, and Canada is, but there are many ways to get there, right? So you can go straight away like this. Some people will just drive there. Or you can go first up here and then go there, or many other ways. But this is what has happened with Finland, and pay attention to this flag over there. So this has been the way of Finland. And if anybody would like to give a little hand to the Finnish performance, you can do it right away now, yeah? You know, there are not too many countries in the whole wide world who have been able to do the same thing, okay? And what is significant here is that this is really we took the first 2 decades, the 70s and the 80s, we're really investing in equity heavily. We wanted to build a system where everybody will learn. We were not so much concerned about educating the talent, making sure that we have some high quality. We wanted to have a lot of high quality learning, okay? And that's why I'll show you some of these things that we were doing, what this equity looks like. What does it mean to invest and build in the system that is more equitable? The first one is, and this is very well known here also in the United States, is that you have to have a funding system that is distributing the resources to schools in a fair way, okay? And we have been always very careful not to have the system that you have here, where the school funding depends on the community property tax, okay? So in the wealthy communities, you have more money, and in the poorer communities here, you have less money in the school. We have actually tried to do this in another way around, that if you have a school that is serving immigrants or poorer part of the population, they will get more resources, more support, so that they can have smaller classes, more teachers, more resources to, you know, help everybody to learn. So the school funding is extremely important, and many people here in America say that you cannot really fix the American school system until you fix the funding system here. But you have to have another way of allocating the resources that you have for schools. I think that you are already spending more than you need for your overall school system. The more important question is that how do you divide this money against the different schools and communities, okay? The second one is that you need to have a comprehensive support and help for the early childhood development, okay? And this is what we have been doing systematically now, at least for the last 30 years, to make sure that every child has a right to daycare and preschool before they start the school when they are 7 years old. Okay? And we in Finland, we believe that we wouldn't be here where we are now if we didn't have this type of systematic way of helping and supporting everybody before they start schooling. The third one is this child wealth and well-being. You saw in the previous chart that Finland is ranked very high also in this area. And this goes from the early childhood development to the 9 years of comprehensive compulsory education that we have, meaning that we have a universal health care, dental care, mental services, counseling in every school, for every child, everywhere in Finland, all the time. So the schools, every school must have these services available for all the children, okay? We are providing healthy school meal for all the children every day, everywhere in Finland. So this well-being is a very important part of the overall educational service in Finland. And then finally, the special needs support for those who have special educational needs. I speak a little bit more about this thing. But unless you have these types of things embedded in your school system, it's very difficult to get more equitable public school system at all. Okay? Are you still all right? Yeah, okay. It's gonna get interesting, okay? Because I will speak about the second key policy, which basically says that we have to invest in right things and intervene early, okay? Just look at this data here, again, coming from the OECD database. I have 4 countries for you. United States here, the Netherlands, Germany, and Finland. There you can compare all of these OECD countries if you want to, but just to keep these things simple, you will see how differently we are spending our resources on children. And a child here means anybody who is 18 years, younger than 18 years old, okay? So this blue one here is the first 6 years of children's lives, okay? So this is how differently we are allocating resources in different countries to the young children. In Finland, those are the children who are not yet in the school system, okay? But if you compare Finland and the United States, you see that we are spending almost 3 times more proportionally of the total investment in children in these early years than you do, okay? And this is how the figure changes. Again, you will see that in the United States, this middle part is the biggest here, meaning the children between 6 and about 12 when they're in a primary school and early years in the middle school, and this is the rest. So countries have very different patterns of investing in people, and you know, this is interesting because the American research, I'm going to show you this in a minute, shows that this is not really the best way to spend your money if you want to have a better rate of return for your investment. But this is about the special needs children, a proportion of those who have special needs in our school system. What you see here is that this is kind of a global trend in different countries, showing you that the older the kids are in the school system, more we have those pupils who have some type of learning difficulties or special needs in our schools. This is not only American phenomenon, this is something that happens around the world. That things are only getting worse the older the age cohort in the school gets, okay? Which indicates that we have something wrong in the way we deal with these children. And this is how it looks like in Finland. So it means that we have a very big proportion of our pupils in the special needs program is in the early years, but because we can intervene early and we can identify those needs early on and provide support, we are able to help them so that these difficulties don't accumulate and become serious problems. Interesting thing is that we have, as we speak here, we have about 1/3 of Finnish students in a primary and junior high school level school system are in special needs programs. 1/3, okay? About half of the kids, when they graduate in the 9th grade, half of our young children have been in some type of special needs or remedial education during their 9 years or 10 years of study. So special education is nothing special anymore. You're actually a special child if you haven't had any special needs, because you're kind of a minority over there. But this is a very important thing, and many of the things that we do in special education in Finland we have learned from the United States, but we do certain things in a very different way. And one of them is that we have a much faster way of beginning the intervention that you have here. Many teachers and people tell me here that you need a painfully long time before you can start to help the child, even when you realize that there's something that this individual needs. In Finland, we can do it basically right away. So, and that makes a big difference. If you have to wait several months, the damage is often done so that you cannot fix these things anymore. So this is the study that many people are referring in Finland as well. And interestingly, when we need evidence in Finnish public policies about where to put our money, we often refer to studies like Jim Heckman's research on rate of return to your investment if you are investing in people. That clearly says that if you want to get the bigger return for your buck, you put your money in early childhood, in the early years of education. Okay? And this is what we have been very carefully reading and implementing these things in our school system as well. My last thing here really is to share you a story of my niece. This is my sister's daughter. I'm going to speak about teachers here in the end as a third key policy in Finland, how we want to make and want to see teachers as professionals. You know, in this picture, she's about 25 years old, but when she was 19, she called me. She was just graduating the high school, and she was a very good girl. You know, she had highest grades, and she was doing music and sports and all these things. And she called me that spring and said that, "Uncle, I have decided to become a primary school teacher." And if you want to be a primary school teacher in Finland, you have to study in a master's degree program in one of our 8 research universities. There's no other way. We don't have Teach for Finland or anything like this available. Yeah. So if you want to teach in a school, the only way you can do it in Finland is to go enroll into the university master's program. All the teachers must have master's degree, study hard, graduate, and then go to work. Okay? So this is what she wanted to do, and she wanted to have my advice how to get in, because I was working at the university earlier, and I was interviewing also many of these applicants and candidates, so I knew something about this thing. And I said that, Vera, you know, you have highest marks on everything. You have studied math and science and music and all these things. You know how to be with people. You love them and so on. Just go there. They will love you and they will take you. Okay? 3 months later, she came back and she was desperately crying. And she said that they didn't take me. And I said, okay, tell me what happened. And she said that, well, you know, the first part of the entrance examination was very easy, that they gave us a book a couple of months before the entrance exam that we had to read. This book, by the way, contains, that time, 7 scientific articles that were published in scientific journals that they had to read and learn by heart. And they were asked 250 multiple choice questions of all of these articles, and you have to be very good to, you know, understand what's going on there, okay? But this is simply to skim off those who are not able to understand professional text, yeah? And then they invited the best candidates, based on this test, to the second part of the entrance examination. That was a group task. About 4 or 5 students were given a task that they had to design an activity for little children in a school. Half an hour, and then they were observed how they work in a team, how they use their creativity and mind and all these things. And then they had to play this activity out, just like, you know, in front of the panel like they were children. And she said, you know, this was easy for me too, because I have 3 little brothers and sisters, and I've been doing these things. I've been planning these activities all my life. And I knew that the problem was in the last part. And the last third part of the entrance examination is individual interview, where the candidate is sitting before the 3 university professors or lecturers, and they ask you questions, difficult questions. And I said that, okay, Vera, what was the most difficult question of all that they asked you? And she said that, I think the most difficult question that I was not expecting was when one of them asked me that, why did you come here? Because when I look at your grades and your diploma, you could be a lawyer or doctor or businessman or whatever you want, but why do you want to be a primary school teacher with these grades? And I said, so what did you say? And she said that, well, I didn't have an answer to this question, so I said that because my uncle is a teacher. Of course, I laughed at that. But then she said, and my mother and grandfather, and many people in our family, they are teachers, so I think it's like a family thing, you know. And somebody in the panel said that, is there anything you would like to add to this? And then she made a mistake. She said, yeah, I love children. That you can't say this. So then she asked, when she stopped crying, she asked me that, so what should I do? Because I really want to be a teacher. I want to work with children. I want to help them to, you know, change their lives. I said, go and work as an assistant in one of the schools here and see how the work as a teacher is like. so that next spring when you apply again, if you get there and they ask you the same question, you can speak about it. Tell them how you feel about, being in a classroom or working with the children or working with the professional teachers. And this is exactly what she did. And she was accepted, and now she graduated last year. And I can tell you one thing, she will be a teacher for life. She will be one of those who will never leave, who will lead but never leave, okay? And if you think that I'm just cherry-picking you an example and try to make you emotional and cry about this, there, by the way, many people here in America who cry when I tell the story of Vera because you would just envy to have anybody who has been rejected from Finland into your teacher education programs. And you have, by the way, you have many of them. In this country has 1,700 different teacher education programs. We have just one, okay? There's no other way than this. But look at this. We had 2,000 applicants in the University of Helsinki, where I also teach a little bit, and we accepted 120 last spring. This spring, the situation will be exactly the same, about 2,000 applicants. We will take 120, the luckiest ones. Handful of these are this spring's high school graduates. Most of them have been like Vera. They go to school and work a little bit or do something else and come back again because it's so difficult to get into the program. So in other words, what we have here, 100% of these people are deeply committed to be teachers, and they can reflect on their own thinking, and they can explain you why they want to teach, what is there in the work of teachers that is driving them to do this thing, okay? So that's why, a big difference that we have between Finland and the United States is that since we have this strict quality control at entry, we don't need to think about things like teacher evaluation or performance pay or these things because, most teachers are very good teachers as they are because we are not allowing anybody into teacher education unless you're really good. So therefore, we don't need to ask questions like, how do you measure the effectiveness of your teachers? We trust them, and we know that they are quite good, okay? So I'm coming to the end of my talk, but I want to show you this one first. Most of you know the 10,000 hour rule, right? Which says that, some people say that it's a Malcolm Gladwell's idea, but it's actually our Swedish researcher Anders Eriksson who has done this. It's a serious part of research. Basically says that if you want to be good in anything, you have to practice that something for 10,000 hours. How long is 10,000 hours in teacher's life? How long do you need to teach to be a great teacher? 10 years, right. It's about 10 years. In this country, you know that half of your teachers are gone before the end of the 5th year. Okay? And this is where you have a challenge, that you will never have enough people there with a long enough career to be on the top of their craft. So one smart education policy is to try to keep your teachers there so that they can reach this 8 years, 9 years, or 10 years so that they can feel that they are great teachers. I was teacher for 8 years, and only I remember my last year in school, I started to feel that, now I think I have a sense of what it is to be a teacher, okay? And not only in a classroom, but also in a staff room with my colleagues, other professionals. So that's a very important thing. So my conclusion here is that, when I look around the world and I witness this spread of disease called germ, my conclusion is that people are trying to do the wrong thing a little bit righter. And that's not the right thing to do. And I'll show you, this is one of my favorite quotations here, quotes from this man, Sir Winston Churchill, yeah? He said something that is very fitting to the business of education reform. He said that you can always count on Americans to do the right thing after they have tried everything else. Isn't it nice? That you're going to get this one, but it's taking painfully long time from you because you have to try all these other things before you get there, yeah? But you have everything it takes to get things right, okay? Just what the Churchill was saying. 5 things that I leave with you. These are from my work and my research as well. The first one is that I think we need more collaboration and less competition in schools. It's a very simple thing like this. Second is that we need to focus more on prevention because it's cheaper than repair. And this is more true in education than anywhere else. If you let things go, fixing the things is much more expensive than preventing, investing in early childhood like we are doing in Finland. The third one is, I offer you a different definition for school readiness, because in this country and many other countries in the world, when you speak about school readiness, you look at the children and how we can shape them to be ready for school. But in Finland, school readiness means that how the school is ready for different children. It's a completely different paradigm again. So let's help our schools to be ready for different children and not insist our children to be ready for one type of school. It's again a very different type of way of thinking about education that we are doing. I think we need more gender equality in our politics and policies as well, if we want to have more child-friendly policies. And I had a pleasure to speak with Nancy and Rita about this earlier today, and I'm a firm believer in this, that we need more women in politics, more people who are able to understand why childhood and early childhood is important also for education. And Finland is one of those countries where we have a very close, equal gender power parity in our parliament, for example. We have 47% at the moment women. And in our government ministers, it's about 50-50. If you take a prime minister who is a male at this moment, we have equal number of cabinet ministers, women and men. So it's very important. In your house, you have 17% of women, and in your Senate, you have 18 women or something like this. You cannot get your policies, child policies right if you don't have more women who think differently about children over there. Amen. And then the fifth one is that it seems like, looking at the OECD evidence as well, it seems like investing in equity will also produce higher quality. And we didn't know this before PISA. And this is what the OECD is concluding, that the highest performing education systems are those that have high equity and high quality. I cannot leave this stage before introducing yet another family member. This is our youngest son, Otto, And in this picture, Otto is 2 months old. This was taken last summer, okay? And, when he was about 2 or 3 months old, I was doing this touring and traveling here and around the world. And every time I left home, I went to him, and, he was looking at me with his big blue eyes. And then he said, "Daddy, don't go. Stay here with me and Mama." And, in Finland, children develop so quickly that even when they're 2 months old, they can speak fluently Finnish. But anyway, I was confronted with this question of a 2-month-old asking me to stay and not to go. What can I say? What would you say? Well, I say that, Otto, when you were born in 17th of April 2012, there were 350,000 brothers and sisters who were born in the same day with you around the world. And the next day, another 350,000. And the day after, 350,000 children more. And I have to go, because if I won't, I'm afraid that many of these children, your brothers and sisters, do not have any more a public school that I had, or your mother had, or my parents had. And I think you deserve a good public school. And he was looking at me and said, "Okay, go. But please, come back." Thank you very much.
Microphones line up. If you have questions, my one admonition is questions, not speeches, since we would like to allow as many people as possible to get their questions answered. And Pasi in particular is really interested in hearing from students, so don't be shy if you have questions, please. And we'll just alternate back and forth from mic to mic, and we will start on this side. If you could just introduce yourself too, please.
Hi, my name is Missy. I'm a middle school math teacher in the Boston Public Schools. Everything you said resonated. I think you made a million great points. One thing I wanted to ask you about was, aside from some of these more theoretical differences, I wanted to ask about curriculum and discrepancies in curriculum. I know as a middle school math teacher, I'm dumbfounded by this country's focus on breadth over depth. And if you could speak a little bit about that, as far as, you hear about Singapore and their math curriculum is, their books are this thin and they really delve into things more deeply. And I feel like our curriculum here is overwhelming, enormous.
Yeah, probably the best way to answer this question is that in Finland, as I said before, that the school is the place where the curriculum is decided. So we don't have a national curriculum that would say exactly what every school has to teach or every teacher has to cover. This is a responsibility of every school and every municipality to decide. So we may have schools where they prefer breadth rather than depth, and we may have schools where they do the opposite. But I think the key point in Finland regarding curriculum in all the subjects is that it's a responsibility of teachers to decide what is the best thing for their children. And that's why I cannot really say how the country is doing with this. I think we are, in math and science, I think we are putting much more focus on applications and problem solving and investigating things than many other countries are doing, and probably less focus on more like theoretical textbook-based things. It's true that if you compare the textbooks here in the United States and in Finland, there's a big difference there. We have many schools now where they don't use textbooks at all. I mean textbooks that children carry with them between home and the school because they are using other types of resources. But the whole curriculum question is that this depends on how the individual school sees and understands what is best for their children.
Thank you.
If I remember, Pasi, the national curriculum in mathematics, grades 1 through 9, is 11 pages. In other words, very, very light guidance to schools.
Yeah, and it doesn't specify anything. What do you need to do in the 4th grade or 6th grade? This is something that the teachers have to decide. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob and Pasi. I taught Chinese, have been teaching Chinese in public and private schools in Singapore and China and the US. I now realize there's many Chinese teachers right now in Finland doing trainings, also school teachers from Singapore. What do you think Finland's education can collaborate with the Chinese and Singapore style, and something that you can share with?
So this is a difficult question, really. I think, but I would say that we are, as I said before, that Finland has been a very good learner from other countries, and we are continuing learning. We are looking particularly closely what Singapore has been doing in mathematics and science as well. I know that many of my colleagues from the university, for example, are having projects together and exchange simply to learn more what you do. But I'm probably too far away from that practice that I would be able to answer you in detail. The other thing with Finland in this particular question is that we are having so many visitors in our country now that is taking time away from looking closely enough what the other countries, whether it's China or Singapore or others, are doing. Actually, we are having so many visitors that we have a thing called Ministry of Education and Culture that we have considered to change the name to Ministry of Education and Tourism because so many people are coming. But I think we have a lot of appreciation to what Asian countries are doing, including Japan, in math and science, and I know that many of my colleagues are learning from them. But other than that, I cannot speak more about this.
Okay, thank you. I just want to add one thing. Do you think Finnish school is interesting? Have partnership schools with Chinese or American school, like?
With Chinese schools?
Yeah, and
American we have a lot of partnerships at the school level with the Chinese schools, a lot actually.
What kind of exchange activities do they?
Yeah, we have one. Esko said that we have one Chinese school where you can study in Chinese language as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm a student here, and one of my beloved unnamed professors is fond of saying that ironically, Finland's success might have created a situation that halts innovation. because in an effort to sort of hold on to gains, you don't want to tinker too much with what has worked. Do you think that there's truth to that, or what's your take on that?
I think there's some truth in this. And this is not typical only to education, the well-performing education system. It's typical to any situation in life where people say that you're the best. And that has been a kind of a destiny of Finland, that there's so many people. Every week we have delegations and they come and say that you have the best thing in the world. And that's why, if you think like this, it is in a way preventing the system to renew itself. Like if I look at Sweden or other Scandinavian countries, when they're trying to catch up Finland, they are much more dynamic in terms of their discourse in educational reform and education policy as well, because they have to change. They have to improve if they want to catch up. But if you are already doing well, you can also think that, it's enough for us to, maintain and try to keep this good situation. But everybody knows, particularly those who are working in business world, that if you have, as soon as you think like this, that I try to maintain this good market share, for example, you're dead. Because then that's the moment when you have to change, you have to come up with a new idea that may make people say, wow. And then you know that we are moving ahead. We are unfortunately not able to do these things to the point that I think should be necessary. But I think he's or she's right. Yeah. Greetings.
Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Bronte. I'm a freshman at Brandeis. One of the things I've been wondering about, I don't know how slavery worked in Finland, but in America, lots of people got a sort of 400-year head start on inequality in America, and that disparity is very prevalent in our education system. And so I guess my question is, I'm wondering how many of these lessons could be applied to our system. Malcolm X, for example, said capitalism can't exist without racism, and in a place where capitalism is our main focus, how much of our education system can afford to go towards the Finland way with, I guess, what we were talking about with equity?
Yeah. Well, I think Finland is an interesting case because you can look at these grand lessons that I have been saying here that goes to equity and equality also in terms of gender and many other things that are big issues. Okay, but Finland also has a lot of like a small mini lessons that you can take a look at. And if you think that you are not able to do away the standardization or competition or standardized testing to the point that Finland has been doing, you can always look at some of the kind of minor things that we are doing. There are actually several schools I know here in the United States in different parts of the country. There are some districts here who have been interested in adopting some of the ideas from Finland, and they are not grand ideas like this one, but for example, simple things like, let's give our little children a 15-minute break between math and reading lesson every day, so that we are not insisting them to have a 3-minute transition break and then continue studying. Or let's reduce their homework load a little bit. Let's be reasonable with these things, okay? Or let's have physical education with the little children. Revolutionary ideas, aren't they? Yeah, because there are many. I've been seeing many schools here where they don't do these things anymore, and these are direct lessons from Finland that anybody can consider. And I know that many people. Actually, my advice here in the United States is exactly this: that if you want to learn from Finland, you cannot change the system overnight. But you can also look at for example, the whole question of standardized testing. I think you are testing your children far too much. You are spending far too much money on standardized testing in this country, and it's doing far too serious damage to many people in your school system. And you could do easily with much less. And if you are serious about this question, you can also come to Finland or many other countries around the world and see that, okay, tell me, how do you do this same thing? So I think it's not always, I'm warning people to think about the Finnish model as a kind of an entire box that should be moved here to the United States, exactly for the reasons that you said, that our cultures are different and people are different, our politics are very different, but you can learn many lessons, many things that are minor and smaller that we have been doing. And I always emphasize that it's not only Finland. There are many other high-performing countries like South Korea, Singapore, Japan. Canada is a great example. Canadian provinces like Alberta, for example, is the highest performing English-speaking education system in the world. And Quebec is the highest performing French-speaking school system in the world. And they're very, very nearby, very close by to you. And you will see many similar things if you go to Alberta, for example, that Finns are doing. So it's not only Finland, there are many other countries that are doing the same.
I wanted to ask first, can American teachers with a master's apply for asylum in Finland?
Yeah, we take about 3 people every year.
I wanted to thank you for your voice because I think it's so desperately needed, especially in this country. I read the Spirit level before, and it fascinates me. I think that the U.S. leads so many industrialized nations in child poverty and homicide and teenage pregnancy and drug abuse and mental illness. It's amazing, and yet it seems like we focus in our country so much on teacher accountability, school accountability, educational crisis and failure and closing schools down. Do you have because you come from a place that has such, the charts show, so much equality. What's your take on that? I think that we lead in all these areas that are a definite crisis, and yet we want to focus on schools only, it seems, in our debates. Do you have a perspective on that?
No, I think this international evidence, this chart that you saw and many others, if you read the Spirit level book, the only conclusion that you get is that we have to fix many other things in our societies before we can do better in education or health or many other things. I think too often I see, particularly in this country, I see people who call themselves education reformers, and they claim that the problem is with teachers, that if only we get better teachers in our classrooms, everything will be fine. And the evidence is very clear that it's not about teachers only. I think teachers are important, but we also need to have a discourse about politics and other things if we want to fix our school systems here in the United States and any other country. Okay? In Finland, for example, we are regularly having the conversation that what does it mean for the country when the inequality is getting worse? And Finland has had one of the fastest decrease of equality of income of all the OECD countries. But again, when you start from the very equal situation, it doesn't show that much. But people often raise this question, that what does it mean for the country? How does it change the society and our school system during the course of the future? So my response is that we have to speak, we have to understand also how these things around education affect on what we are trying to do in our school systems, and get beyond this rhetoric that it's only about the teachers or schools or curriculum. They are important, but teachers can only do that much.
A quick interjection here.
Yeah, may I have a short comment on that? Because I think it's very important to understand that education has its limits, and it creates equality for opportunities, but how these opportunities are used is a very complicated issue. And to be honest, Finland doesn't look that good in that area. We have a lot of dropouts, we have a lot of problems, especially with boys, to get them employed and to get them integrated into society. So education is a very critical element, but it's not going to be able to solve all problems. And finally, I'd like to ask you one question related to that. What to do because of the fact that we can see that boys are now dropping out in a way, which is, the trend is very, very scary. And we can see that in spite of the fact that the school is trying to do its best, the fact is that this problem is getting worse in today's circumstances. Can you imagine what can we do with the school? Because I believe that it's one of the challenges of the school system, that what it can do for that.
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you very much for bringing this along. Often in these conversations and question and answer sessions, we are only focusing on good things, like what are we doing. I think it's very, very important also to look at the other side of the thing. And you are right that we have this thing that we have increasing number of young people who drop out, not only from education, but the society as a whole. They just marginalize. And my response to your question is that perhaps there's nothing that the school can do as it is now for this, particularly with these boys, that they simply vote with their feet to the situation that the school is not able to provide any more kind of a relevant environment for them to learn. And I think that if we really want to solve this problem, it will be very hard to solve this problem in Finland or any other country by trying to do the same things, similar things that we are doing now, but in just a little bit different way. It doesn't change if we change the curriculum or a number of lessons that kids have to be in the school. I think we have to change the whole design of the school. And in my book, I'm offering an idea, kind of a thing where you can start to think about this thing, is to reduce the number of formal instruction classes where teacher is standing there and the kids are sitting, and increase the time where people can do and work with their own problems, with the teams, and with the things that they think that are important and meaningful for them. If we do that one, I think we are able to keep many more boys and many more young people in the school and learning. But other than that, I think we have tried everything, most of the things in Finland also, with the curriculum and kind of this model of design that we have tried before, and it simply doesn't work.
We're almost out of time. We have 5 people in line. If we said we have 5 more minutes.
Yeah, can we take let's take like three questions in a row and let's see what
Sure,
people
let's do
have.
that. Great. Why don't we'll take the 3 from this side, then respond, and then take the 2 from this side, and then we'll call it quits.
All right, okay.
Yes.
Okay, hi, my name is Joona Saleva. I'm a freshman here at Harvard College, and I'm from Finland. Myself, I grew up there, and I want to thank you for a very interesting talk. But one thing I noticed when I moved here is that a lot of people sort of just had this notion of Finland having the overall best education system in the world, and much of what we focused on today was early education. And I'm wondering, is the same evidence or the same data, are the same results present in, for example, high school education? Because I feel that there's sort of a danger of extrapolation there. Because I myself I did the International Baccalaureate high school program, and I noticed that we were taught a lot of critical thinking and things that are not necessarily parts of the Finnish national high school model. And when I was talking to my friends who did the national program, we noticed a really, really big discrepancy there. So is the same data present in high school type data as well?
Yeah. Thank you. Tony.
Hi, Pasi. I was going to invite you to extend those remarks around student motivation. First of all, what did the Finnish education system do to try to increase intrinsic motivation of students for learning? And what more do you think they're going to have to do? Is there a changing demographic, in other words? Are students more difficult to motivate today? And how do you see those challenges?
Okay.
Thank you.
My question concerns the relationship between math instruction and multilingualism. I've seen in New York City the growth of a number of programs in schools that are trying to create bilingualism in monolingual students, and one of the techniques that they're using is to alternate years, say teaching math and English one year and teaching it in Mandarin another year. Having never met an adult who does math in 2 languages, I would really like to hear your opinions about how you integrate multilingual education with a coherent math education program.
Okay.
It's a challenging one. Yes.
Yeah, well, I think time is out already. These are really tough. But you know, your question of the high school, as I said before, we know very little about how the high school age students and school systems are performing around the world. So we can, based on evidence, we can say very little about which country has better or worse school system in a high school level. I agree with your notion that we have similar issues in Finland too, that we are not completely happy with the teaching and learning at the moment, in particularly in our academic high school. But there's also, we spoke with Tony yesterday about the vocational track in Finnish high school system. That is a kind of an interesting thing. But we cannot really speak too much about this thing. The intrinsic motivation question, I think the best way to answer this is that we are trying to individualize our school and classroom practices as much as we can. And individualization, making things personal, always tries to go close to the intrinsic motivation. In other words, making sure that the kids are doing what they think is important and meaningful for them. And I think standardization, you know, insisting that people have to do common thing is always more challenging from the point of view of the motivation thing. And I think that this local autonomy, freedom of schools and teachers to design their own curriculum and own way of working is also helping them to become closer to this situation where kids can do whatever they want to do. I cannot really comment on this multilingual math teaching because I simply don't know too much about that fact. I'm sorry about this.
Last two questions.
Okay, so I had a long, involved question, but I think I've shortened it enough.
Thank you.
And I'm interested in teacher preparation, and specifically how the Finnish system promotes reflective practice within the teacher preparation, and then also to what extent are teacher preparation programs bringing in the neuroscience research and looking at the neurobiology of learning and teaching and social and emotional learning in transparent ways?
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I am Maria Antonieta. I am from Peru. I am a student at the Kennedy School. And my question is related to that. We have this difficult problem in my country to select the mentors. There are people that are training the teachers. So how you face this problem in your country?
To choose the mentors?
Mentors are people that train teachers.
Initial teacher education?
Yes.
Okay, good. You remember the story of Vera? You know, educating reflective practitioners begins in that panel. The question of why do you want to teach? How do you know that you are a teacher is the question that begins the journey in those people who we are training to be teachers in our primary school. And it continues from day one when they enter the Department of Teacher Education in our universities, that they start to learn how to reflect on their own thinking and their own minds and their own behavior as teachers. It's not something that we give in a one course in a year 4 where you teach the theories of reflection and practice related to this. This is integrated as part of the work. The question of how do we choose the teacher educators, because teacher education in Finland is within the academic university department of education. So it means that the faculty that has been appointed to do that work are the people who will be educating the teachers. So Finland has a very unique situation internationally. We are one of the few countries where the system of higher education includes Department of Teacher Education. So teacher education coordination is not in a one office or one box like I see in many other countries. It's a department among the higher university departments overall. And those people who are the faculty of the department are also training, educating the teachers, including the clinical practice schools that we have. All the universities are also running their own or the managed public schools where students are doing their clinical practice. And these teachers in that school, I was teaching in one of them, they are part of the faculty of education. Thank you.
Great. Please join me in thanking Pasi for a wonderful talk.